I'd like to tell you a story. In the middle of nowhere, there is a long and winding road that leads to a hole in the ground. This quaint cottage sits quietly nestled in the trees, surrounded by countryside. However, this little cottage is in fact a lie. If you were lucky, then you haven't spent much time thinking about the next World War. However, if nuclear detonations are at its core, then a horrendous chain reaction would ensue. The most obvious and most immediate devastation would come from the initial blasts, wiping out the vast majority of the UK's population. These people would then have to endure the grueling -20 to -40 degree conditions. There would be no harvests to acquire any crops for 2 years, and even then, the soil would be too irradiated and likely untenable. If you were unfortunate enough to survive the initial blast and survive the nuclear winter, then you would also have to face the dissension of social order, where humans would kill each other for food. The country would be reduced to an almost medieval social system. I think that Louis Mountbatten said it well when he said that if the Third World War was fought with nuclear weapons, the Fourth would be fought with bows and arrows. When you turn the corner from the steps, you enter a tunnel that is 110 meters long. This length was required for 2 reasons. The first was to disperse the power of any blast that may have detonated locally above ground. It is believed that the second reason for the vast length of the tunnel was for easy defense against intruders when the blast doors eventually had to reopen. This secret bunker was commissioned by central government and was built in 1952 as a safety net in the event of a nuclear attack during the Cold War. The facility could hold up to 600 people. However, there was insufficient accommodation for this number of personnel. The bunker has concrete walls that are 10 feet thick with a Faraday cage entwined. The bunker was fully operational up until 1992, and in 1994 it was officially decommissioned as an active government headquarters. The bunker was powered by 2 Rolls-Royce diesel engines with enough diesel fuel in the ground to last for at least 3 months once the blast doors shut. The blast doors each weigh 1.5 tons. The purpose of the bunker was to keep communications alive between central government and survivors after a nuclear attack. When entering the blast doors, you enter the bottom floor of a 3-floor facility. The bottom floor of the bunker housed a Home Office radio room with a complete BBC radio studio, a communications area, plotting room, and various plant facilities. The communications area had over 2,500 telephone lines coming into the bunker. Later, these lines were changed for modern fibre optics, which were far more resistant to electromagnetic pulse. There was a room dedicated to scientific research on this floor. It was a scientist's job to determine where a bomb had detonated, how big it was, and how far above ground it burst. This would all affect the amount of dust and fallout, and of course they would also need to know both the wind speed and direction. It was this room that would authorize various color-coded types of warnings. The plotting room was used to plot the locations of nuclear detonations to measure the spread of radiation. Information pertaining to the spread of radiation would have come from the chain mail of Royal Observer Corps bunkers that were spread every 7 or 8 miles throughout the country. These small bunkers would have become the central government's eyes and ears in the event of an attack. In the event of an attack, the government would have devolved into regional areas. There were 11 other bunkers in the country, all controlling specific regions. The plotting room also houses a dedicated strong room for cabinet members to lock themselves in the event of a ground-based attack or an internal mutiny. It is believed that this room would also store gold, a common wartime trait, and also cyanide, if the worst came to the worst. There were various facilities on the bottom floor, a sewage plant that processed the foul water by blowing the sewage up to the surface to 2 external sewage fields, and a plant room that helped keep the bunker at a stable temperature. With 600 bodies all producing serious heat in a sealed concrete box, this system was an absolute necessity. Many people think that the cold is the main issue in a facility like this. The opposite is in fact true. The middle floor was home to the main governmental bodies. There were 3 large dormitories, one allocated to the commissioner, who would have been in charge of all of the personnel in the bunker. There was a room for the principal officer, who was the second in command, and would have backed up the commissioner with decisions. There was also a large dormitory dedicated to the Prime Minister, whose role wasn't to help run the bunker. Instead, the Prime Minister would have tried to negotiate peace and keep the nation united via radio broadcasts. In the centre of the middle floor is a huge room dedicated to a myriad of governmental departments, from Ministry of Defence to Ministry of Housing. judiciary to the Home Office. Their sole purpose was to allocate resources to above-ground survivors. There would have been 450 people rotating positions in this room. There was a storeroom adjoining, which had an array of Geiger counters and more traditional writing materials in case of electrical failure. We now ascend to the top of the bunker. This is the sick bay, where people would have been treated for any ailments that may have befallen them. It's unknown exactly what the protocol was for dead bodies. The bunker had folded cardboard coffins left in storage, which leads us to believe that corpses were to be put in body bags and then shut inside these makeshift cardboard coffins. It is likely that these bodies would have been later moved outside to join the millions of corpses on the surface. This floor was also home to a large quantity of workers at the facility. It is believed that 600 people would have lived in the bunker. However, there were only 200 beds. This led to the implementation of a hotbed system, where you would have an 8-hour shift in bed, and then another person would enter the bed when you woke up. The top floor also housed the canteen. Food and supplies would have been shipped in during the period of tension, and not only put in the large storeroom, but also under beds. There were no freezers in the facility, nor would there have been any washing up machines or lifts. Electricity and water would have been a premium, and so all of the food would have to be dried, tinned or pre-packed. Kelvedon Bunker cost a total of £11.5 million to build. It would cost at least £100 million to build the equivalent today. It cost £3 million to keep it on standby alone. The secret bunker at Kelvedon is now open to the public, and whether you think of it as an unfair retreat for the most privileged in our society, or you think of it as a necessary means to keep Britain united in times of utter destruction, it's one of the most interesting locations we've ever been to. You can find out more about Kelvedon Bunker online. We hope you enjoyed the first episode of Underworld. Please remember to like the video and subscribe for more tours of unique and secret locations. P.S. Before entry to the bunker was allowed, all personnel had to sign a contract stating that they were happy to leave their families and children on the surface as they entered the bunker. Think about that.